on days that you want to be positive about the show and stuff like that, do you ever feel like, okay, I've got to find some negatives or be negative in general because that's what people expect?
Hey, friendo, Steve here.
Hey, Larson.
And you're watching Tom Talks Rubbish.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talks Rubbish, and stand back for another interview. This time, I'm joined by Alex Pawlowski from Fightful. So welcome to the show, Alex.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So if we take this back, just to get a knowledge of like your wrestling fandom, where does Alex first discover wrestling?
Honestly, I get started with the Hulk Hogan cartoon in the mid '80s called Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling. Because I didn't actually watch wrestling when I was a kid. That wasn't really on the TV that I had like back in the mid '80s. There was a cartoon show where Hulk Hogan and all the good guys, like played pranks on. Gosh, who were the Piper was a bad guy. I think Hillbilly Jim was a bad guy. I know Big John Studd was a bad guy, but they're all those animated versions of each other. It was basically just like your regular run-of-the-mill Saturday morning cartoon, but they were all wrestling characters. And so I was like, this is interesting. I was 5. So it wasn't like it was much of an interesting thing, but I didn't really get into wrestling until going into college. Because I was a freshman in college in the fall of '97. And so I was on a dorm floor with all these other guys. And on a random Monday, I was walking to like the cafeteria or something to get a late dinner. And I realized there were these 2 doors open across the hall from each other. And I don't know, maybe 15 guys spread out between the 2 rooms. And what I realized was one of them was playing Nitro and the other one was playing Raw. And they would run back and forth depending on what was on the shows. And I was like, I'll hang out. Sure, why not? We got a pizza delivered. And that was the first night. And we did that literally every Monday for the rest of the school year. And that was how I got into the Monday Night Wars, was literally being able to watch across the hall from each other.
That is so cool. But just to go back to the cartoon for a second, if we could. Do you think that's something that could work today? Or do you think because wrestlers are more lifelike, maybe it wouldn't?
Well, I don't know, man. The WWE seems like a cartoon some of the time to me. So maybe that's their point. Maybe that's where they're going with this. But I do think that it's there's a way of doing it where it's more like, I don't know, like kind of more of an anime. You could do it in that way where it's not adult, but it's definitely not made for like little kids. I think there's a way to like get in like the younger teenagers, like 11, 12, 13-year-olds to like get into it that way. And then see all these people they're watching in this like animated series, like see them in real life.
Yeah. So if we continue to the Monday Night Wars, do you think, and I know it sounds really like a stupid, maybe generic question, but if you hadn't have been walking past those dorms at that time, do you think you would have discovered wrestling, or was it something that was not on your radar whatsoever? I
mean, separate from that, there were other guys that I knew who were into it at that time, but I didn't really like. I would overhear them talking about it, but I wasn't really into it. And then that experience of being able of doing the thing in the dorms happened. And all of a sudden, when they would be talking, I would get involved in the conversation. Like, yeah, I saw that match. That was amazing. And we'll start talking. So but just hearing them talk about it, it wasn't really that interesting to me. It was the experience of being there with all these other people reacting together to what we saw that kind of made it into a communal thing.
Yeah. I get what you mean. So it's like not almost like trying to fit in, but almost like, I've got to be careful how I phrase this because I don't want to offend you, but like, it's almost like everyone else is doing it sort of thing. Maybe I'll try to, not to be cool, but do you know what I mean?
No. Yeah.
Trying to figure out how to phrase that.
Yeah, definitely. Really these guys were definitely not cool. So it was not trying to be like part of the in crowd. It was just, well, everyone seems to be having a great time. What is this? And I remember saying, what is this? And they're like, it's WWE or WWF, I guess at the time. And I was like, oh, okay. And I think the first guy I saw cut a promo was The Rock.
Ooh.
And I was like, well, now I'm in. Like, you know,
fair enough.
I think it depends on what do you see when you first turn on the show? Like, what is your first experience? And if it's The Rock cutting a promo on some jabroni, you're going to give the rest of the time, you're going to give it your attention.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the question I am always curious to know, if Alex at the age you are now was to discover that kind of wrestling, do you, without any previous knowledge, would you have maybe got into it? Or
I mean, I think I had to be like 18 years old and like finding myself in the adult world or whatever.
Yeah.
Because like, you know, it's the Attitude Era, that's what they were trying to bring in, was that demographic. I've gone back now later in my late 30s, early 40s and seen some stuff from the Attitude Era. I'm like, no, that wouldn't work. But that's mostly like the societal way. I mean, Rock will translate to whatever time period you want. Stone Cold will, but some of the stuff they were doing otherwise wouldn't have. I do think that it depends on what kind of wrestling that I would be introduced to now. Like, I think if I didn't watch wrestling my entire life and made it to, you know, now 42 years old with a wife and a kid, and someone said, here's wrestling, look at wrestling, I would be like, this isn't for me. But because I have that nostalgia, like that original hook, I'll always find myself going back to it. And there was a time where I wasn't watching wrestling at all.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
If that's okay.
No, absolutely.
And then what if we flip the question on its head? What if you were to discover today's wrestling as a teenager? Do you think you would get into it as much?
Oh, without a doubt. Like if I well, it depends. If I discovered WWE's current product when I was in my late teens, I would have skipped it entirely. Like that would not have been for me. But if I discovered, like, let's say AEW or some of the stuff that's happening on the indies, if let's say what Impact is doing right now was very popular and other people were watching it a lot, and I was brought into that and I watched their product, I'd probably be real into that. The problem with Impact is I can't watch wrestling every night of the week, and that one is, to me, by far less. I'm getting less questions about that. Less people, hey, did you see that about Impact? Because nobody's watching it. It's not because the product's bad. It's because it's hard to find. It's on their own network, all this kind of stuff. But I think that, like, for example, AEW is what I'm into the most now. I think I would be super into that, 25 years ago.
Fair enough. So you brought up there before I sort of steered the conversation, and I apologize for that.
That's all right. No problem.
The fact that you fell out of wrestling. So what was it that ultimately made you fall out of wrestling?
Well, he still remains my best friend in the world. But he was in undergrad when I was in grad school. I had one more year of grad school left when he graduated as a senior. And we had been watching wrestling together in the mid-aughts. And then he left because he graduated and I had one more year and I didn't have anybody to watch with.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of fell out of favor. I would like flip it on and be like, okay, I see what this is. And I didn't have time because I was in grad school. I didn't have a lot of time to do that. And then I got away from that and I started doing because I'm a stage actor by trade. That was what I studied for. And so, if you're in rehearsals and stuff, you don't have time to watch wrestling, keep up with that kind of stuff. You kind of manage what you have available to you, whatever your time can work out with. And so it kind of fell out of favor. And then it was probably 2014 was when the WWE Network launched.
Mhm.
Like the first thing I watched at all in wrestling in maybe 5 years was Brock beating Taker. I turned on WrestleMania 30 halfway through because I was like, oh, WrestleMania's on and they got this network thing. I might as well try the network thing because I loved the idea of going back and watching old pay-per-views and stuff. So I was like, I'll try it. WrestleMania's on. And I actually watched maybe the last 3 minutes of that match. And everyone was so shocked. I was like, I didn't understand the context of it because I hadn't been watching for several years.
Yeah.
And so it was that thing. And then I got to watch in real time with having no prior knowledge of any of this. Daniel Bryan win in that triple threat versus Orton or Batista and Orton, I think it was.
Yeah. It was.
And I had no context of it, but I was right there with everybody in that arena, sitting on my couch alone, watching that because that obviously felt like one of the most important moments in wrestling, even though I had no context for who this little guy was with a beard. I just knew I was supposed to root for him because look at him and look at those guys. I mean, I remembered Orton and Batista, and I was like, Orton and Batista versus this guy, that guy's got no shot. But they want me to think he's got no shot. So he's got to win, right? He's got to win, right? Like, and after that, I started going back with the network and rewatching some stuff that I had missed and kind of getting caught up. And I don't think I've missed a WWE pay-per-view since because I had the network. So I was able to just watch those kind of things here and there. And it became like a thing. I was kind of like, I had friends that from work that were into it. And we would talk like every Tuesday morning about Raw or whatever. Sometimes we'd like instant message chat during the pay-per-views, stuff like that. And I got into it again that way. So kind of again through like the communal thing of actually having friends to talk to about it.
Is wrestling something that's a community-based activity for you in the sense that you dropped out because a good friend of yours stopped watching with you? You started because you were watching with friends in college. Right. So is that something that for you is better watching with people? I hope that question made sense.
No, absolutely it does. I wouldn't know because at this point, I watch it alone. I don't watch it with anybody else. Like right now, I don't have a. I mean, I don't think of it as watching alone. Because I have the Sour Graps community that I communicate with while watching it, and then I get to communicate with on my show, reviewing it afterwards. That is my sense of community of watching it. But actually sitting on a couch with another person watching a wrestling show, that's been years. Like it just, I mean, the pandemic certainly got rid of that too. Being a dad has gotten rid of that. My wife isn't into wrestling at all, so that's gotten away with that as well. So I don't really have that community right now. I don't know if I had a neighbor who was really into wrestling and wanted to come over and watch Double or Nothing tomorrow night. Maybe it would be better. Maybe it would be worse. I'm not really sure.
Fair enough. So you brought up the Sour Graps there. But before we get into all of that, I'm really curious to know, because I've heard a lot of great stories about how the good people of Fightful first interacted with Sean Ross Sapp. Mm-hmm. So how did you first connect with Sean?
I watched his, listened to the podcast that he did over at Wrestling Inc., the Raw review. I remember thinking that this guy seems really knowledgeable. I liked his stuff. And then I followed him on Twitter, and I had gotten my entire department at a birthday supplies website got laid off, let go, because they were selling directly to the consumer, and I was writing all the copy for the products and stuff like. Why you would want to buy this particular set of plates and cups for your 6-year-old, son's birthday party kind of thing. It was fine. I liked it, but the whole thing dissolved and I lost my job. And then I went and started something else. I hated that. I just had to quit. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do because I don't want to go back and work in an office. Like I was in a really bad place, like working in an office, and like was like, do I want to go and like try to teach? What do I want to do with my life? This is before I had a daughter, so I was able to like I had some more leeway of like what am I gonna do? I'm at a crossroads, and I'd always thought I would want to like try writing about professional wrestling, like in a fun way, like review it, but like trying to be humor about it, that kind of a thing, humorous about it. And then I just saw a random tweet from Sean Ross Sapp saying, I'm looking for people to write for a new website. Send me a sample. And at that point, for like the past 3 or 4 weeks at Cage Side Seats, which was at the time, maybe it still is, almost an entirely community run wrestling website where other people in the community would just write for free. They would like write reviews and posts and stuff and get them posted. And if they got enough upvotes, they made it to the front page or whatever. And so I was writing reviews unsolicited of Main Event and Superstars, like the absolutely C and D shows. But I was trying to make them fun. And like, obviously the quality of the programming there was less than you would find on Raw and SmackDown. So I would kind of make fun of it while trying to like fix it. Like that was my whole thing of like, this is bad. Here's what I would do to make it better. But trying to make it all in a way that was funny to the reader. And I sent in some samples of that to Sean and he hired me on the spot.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, that's awesome. And it started out as like, you know, it was a fledgling website. We weren't really paying much more than some websites still pay now. But I was starting out writing news articles and also humorous features about wrestling. And then one day, like Sean couldn't find anybody to co-host with him for the podcast for Battleground 2016. And he was like, "Do you have a microphone and a webcam?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay. Can you co-host with me on this pay-per-view tonight?" And I was like, "Sure." And I was really nervous. I didn't know if I was going to do good or not. And now, like hundreds of episodes later of doing podcasts for Fightful, I guess I did all right.
Fair enough. So how does the Sour Graps then eventually come into your life?
Well, I was reviewing for years the Raw review of for Fightful with Sean, and I had just gotten so, for lack of a better term, soured on
I see what you did there.
Yeah, there you go. The WWE product had just gone downhill for me so much, and I couldn't hold back. Like I was just like, this is terrible. This storyline is terrible. They've been doing the same thing every week for now 2 months. Or this character, the booking for this character is so bad. They can't build baby faces. Their heels are all losers or whatever. All of this, it didn't make sense to me. I didn't like it. So it became, there were people at the time who still really liked WWE and would complain to Sean that I was being too negative. So he's like, we don't want to lose viewership. I totally think you have a valid opinion. We don't want to lose viewership. We're starting to build this other thing called Fightful Select, this paywalled subsidiary of the website. And we want to start building out podcasts for it. How would you feel about having your own show where you could do whatever you want, say whatever you want behind the paywall about WWE programming? And I said, I have the perfect name for it, Sour Graps. And from then on, I was like, okay, great. And I said, I'm going to do the first show. I promised I would do the first show to the fans for the draft in 2019, which was also the same show that Kofi Kingston defended the WWE title against Brock Lesnar on the first SmackDown on Fox.
Oh, no.
And lost in 6 seconds. So I had plenty to be sour about on that first episode, but I was on vacation. And so I ended up doing that first podcast on my phone, sitting in the kitchen of my sister-in-law's house. And that was the first one. And since then, we're almost at 300 episodes of Sour Graps since that night.
How hard is it? Because obviously your show has negative connotations just by the name sometimes.
Right.
Is it hard to stay positive overall with wrestling because people expect you to be negative? I hope that made sense.
No, it makes sense. I mean, sometimes I'll people who are really excited because they think that something that has happened on WWE that night is just terrible. So they can't wait to tune in to see me talk about it because they think I'm going to roast it or whatever. And most of the time, I agree with them. It's terrible. But sometimes I'll try and every now and then, if I have a specific performer that I really enjoy, I will try and find a silver lining in whatever they're doing on screen. But for the most part, it's not hard to like staying positive is not the point. The point is to be realistic with my like what I'm going to call it like I see it. That's the whole thing.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
There have been a few episodes of the show where I'm like, wow, Raw was actually good tonight. Like, why is that such a change from before? What caused the change? And can we realistically expect for it to stay good going forward? And the answer usually, unfortunately, has been no. So exactly. So when there's a rare good episode of Raw, I would be like, okay, tonight was good.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about why it's probably going to be bad next week. And that's kind of the way it works. I always say that I will find fault with things that I don't like, but I will always try to offer up a solution. Like, this is what you could do with this character that you're not doing right now. Like, if I was writing this storyline, here's how I would do it. Now, you may think, well, that's not a great idea, but at least I'm saying, like, there are other things they could do besides this thing that we both agree, viewer of my show, is not working. So here's an alternative at least. And that's what I try and do.
Fair enough. So where you talked about, obviously, that first episode being recorded on your iPhone because you were on vacation. How have you ultimately seen Sour Graps change for the better or maybe for the worse? I don't want to say that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. It used to be just me sitting and streaming it to maybe 12, 15 live viewers, and then they would catch it the following day on the replay or whatever. We've built up a really great community so that we get 50 live viewers on the low end, over 100 on the high end. And they're all in the chat, like putting out, like making their own jokes that somehow I'll bring in, or their own observations, and they all the regulars in the chat now communicate with each other, and have full on conversations in the chat while they're listening to me rant and riff on whatever's going on in WWE. But I would think that the main reason why I think it's gotten a lot better is the addition of my co-host Kate, who came on right around the time that NXT Black and Gold became NXT 2.0. Because I knew I wasn't going to be able to continue to review whatever the hell was going to happen with the Rainbow thing that they were doing, where they were firing all of my favorite guys.
Starburst, as I call it.
Right, exactly. So I had seen what she had done on other shows on Fightful, and I was like, would you like to come on and co-host at least for a while to see if it works? And it worked immediately. And I think that we play really well off of each other. And I think our interplay is what keeps the whole thing light. Like, we might both hate an episode of NXT or whatever else we're viewing, but because our interaction is positive, we're both trying to pop each other, make each other laugh. That helps so it doesn't become a slog for the viewer watching somebody go, well, this sucked. This was terrible. That match was bad. This storyline is terrible, because it's not just saying the thing is bad. It's this is bad. Here's how it might be fixed. Also, here's a little joke and interplay between the two of us that actually makes it fun to watch.
So, two unrelated questions before we go into a segment that I call generic questions, my friend, which is, do you think on days that you want to be positive about the show and stuff like that, do you ever feel like, okay, I've got to find some negatives or be negative in general because that's what people expect?
I will say it's not hard to find them. They're usually right there in my face. But the thing of it is that the ones I love are the ones where there's at least some positive to get into. Like, okay, let's talk about this and why this segment was great, and why can't you do this with the rest of the show? You've proven with this segment that you have what it takes to write a good storyline, good interplay between these characters, leading to a match that makes sense, logically based storytelling. You've proven that. So because you can do that here, you have no excuse why you can't do it in all these other storylines. So I'm trying to find the good with the bad, I suppose. But it's never like, let me see if I can find a way to tear this down. If it's good, I nothing would make me happier, I've always said, than for WWE to be so consistently good that I have to change the name of my podcast.
I was just going to ask you that question.
You know, like if there's, like, let's say 2 straight months of great programming on Raw and SmackDown, and every time I come on, I say, well, this show didn't suck. All these segments were great. Like, everything, it was great across the board. By the time we get to several weeks of that, then I can no longer call my show Sour Graps. I'll still review it, but I'll figure out a different way of, like, you know, talking about it. But I will always be honest with what I felt like the segment was. I'll never, you know, like, increase the negativity towards something. I'll never downplay the positivity of anything, but I'm always going to be honest.
Fair enough. So as we look at wrapping this up, because I do want to be respectful of your time,
sure,
we're going to go into a segment that I call generic questions. This is where those of you that have seen my videos before will know this is where I ask my guests their favorite match, their favorite pay-per-view, favorite tag team, favorite wrestler or superstar, and favorite show they watch on a weekly basis, and favorite theme song. Basically, all the questions that I'm sure they get asked on Twitter on a daily basis. So now they'll have a place to be like, look, I've answered this. Go watch this.
Right.
So what's your favorite match of all time, Alex?
That's really tough because I've watched so many on a weekly basis that I forget things so quickly. And so I would say most recently, the one that I think that I will look back on in 5 years and watch over and over again is Young Bucks versus FTR from Dynamite. Like that match blew me away in every possible facet. And even in going back a few months from that, it'll probably be Bryan Danielson versus Hangman. Both of those matches.
Both of them were sick.
They were very, very incredibly good. So those are ones I think I will go back 5 years from now and watch them again. And that's kind of my criteria, is that will I seek out this match again in 5 years? Like that's what makes my short list.
Fair enough. Favorite pay-per-view of all time?
You know, it's kind of a cheesy thing to say because it was very recent, but I'd probably go with Full Gear last year for 2 reasons. One of them being, Hangman overcoming Kenny finally. And the other one is Punk and Kingston was just a cathartic experience. Like I've never watched another match where I felt like both men legitimately wanted to kill each other and just might.
Fair enough. Favorite tag team of all time?
it feels like recency bias, but I think it is. It's FTR / the Revival. I mean, all of their big matches, going back to their NXT days, I always find something else that I go, man, that was so slick. Like, I don't know how those guys came up with the timing required for some of their heel spots is just so good. Their reactions, all of their selling, everything, the way they work as a team, like FTR, Revival, that's it for me.
Favorite theme song of all time, like wrestler entrance music.
That's really tough. I think honestly, I would say that because usually it becomes like, when I hear it, do I think of a specific moment? And the one that jumps to mind right now is Edge's theme song, the old one, the one he had before this new House.
The one he came back to at the Royal Rumble.
When he come back at the Royal Rumble and that played, and if you know the lyrics, like I know the lyrics, like by heart, like on this day I see clearly everything has come to life. And he's there, and everyone's going crazy for him. And he thought for years he'd never be back doing this. Like that song, like that imbued that moment with so much more. Like if a song is catchy, great. But like if it actually feels like that a moment that it is the soundtrack to a specific moment in wrestling, like that's where it crosses the line into greatness.
Fair enough. And as we look at wrapping this up, Alex, obviously I want to say thank you for coming on. I've really enjoyed this. But the question that I end all my interviews on is with YouTube, with podcasting, with social media in general. We're all sort of going to live forever in some sort of way. So what is one video or podcast in your case that you want the good people to check out? And then what is one that you're like, don't go back and watch that. I've grown a lot since then.
Well, any of the really early pandemic stuff, it was really hard to like process what we were watching because like that was. I would say those are like me going like, well, I don't know what's going on. They're doing this stuff in front of nobody, and I'm not really sure how to respond to it. Do I allow them to grade on a curve because what else are you going to do or whatever? So that's one that I would say probably don't check out those. But only because it was brought up recently. Am I thinking of this one? I did years ago when they were turning Lacey Evans babyface and she was working opposite Bayley.
A thing, wasn't it?
Yeah. And they out of the blue, she'd been a heel forever. They said, well, I don't know if you know this, but she is both a Marine and a mom, and therefore you have to cheer for her. Yeah. She was working opposite Bayley and Sasha. And she cut her own promo and posted it to her social media, where she was wearing one of her silly outfits with the poofy skirt and a big apron and a silly hat. And she was walking around carrying a chicken under her arm and never addressed the fact that she was carrying a chicken. Like, it was the weirdest thing ever. And so I think I went for maybe, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes just on the ridiculous nature of this promo of like, at some point her daughter meets her at a gate and Lacey hands her the chicken. It's like through the opening in the gate, and her daughter hands her back a single egg.
Yeah.
And then Lacey Evans takes the egg and puts it in her apron pocket and then gets on like a 4-wheel ATV and speeds away. And I was like, where are you taking the egg? Why did your daughter give you the egg? What is going on? It like made no sense. And things like that, where they just make no sense, allow me to kind of like really riff into them of like the logic of all this doesn't make any sense at all. Plus they were doing a thing that night as well, where they were like, everyone was cheering USA for Lacey Evans during a feud she was having with Bayley and Sasha, who are also from the USA.
Which makes no sense.
Which makes no sense at all. So If you can find some episodes where I'm just talking about the craziness that just doesn't make sense in wrestling, I think those are kind of my wheelhouse.
And as we wrap this up, because we've only got a few minutes before the Zoom will crap out,
Sure.
Where can the good people find you?
You can find me on the Twitter at Alex Sauer Graps. On Fightful, I do every week the NXT post show with Kate, with Kate Elizabeth. It's on the regular free YouTube behind the paywall Fightful Select, which is totally worth your $5 a month. I review Raw and SmackDown, and then for big events like tomorrow's Double or Nothing. Kate
At time of recording, I will just say that. I'm not too sure when this is going to go up.
At time of recording, which is Double or Nothing, behind the paywall. It's Kate and I are going to review that, and we're sure to have a couple hundred people in the chat and have a lot of fun. We're going to do that also for all the WWE pay-per-views for the rest of the summer. And then we'll for big events like that as well. We always try and get a stream up after the big events, and people seem to really like those.
It's well worth doing, guys. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talks Rubbish. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talks Rubbish. Follow bodyslam.net and the Wrestle Watch podcast on Twitter, and subscribe to bodyslam.net for my show with Cassidy Haynes, the Wrestle Watch podcast, and follow TTR Clips for clips from my interviews. And I will see you in the next one. Bye. Bye.